2,500 years ago, here in Deer Park in Sarnath, Buddha gave his first teachings on the path to enlightenment. But it was here, in Bodh Gaya, India, after 7 years of meditation, that Prince Siddhartha found enlightenment and became a Buddha. As little as 50 years ago, around the time that I was born, Buddhism was still virtually unknown in Canada. Yet now, in the 21st century, Buddhism stretches itself westward to become a truly worldwide religion. As I moved into the 21st century, Buddhism for me was little more than the figure of the Dalai Lama and some quirky notions of karma. Hello, my name is Larry Tilsley. I grew up in Hamilton, and it was here in the 1980s, as I was growing into my 20s, that I became aware of social injustices, which changed the focus of my life. There was a radical shift towards taking action to right those injustices. A void inside me was filled with a sense of being part of something bigger than myself, something that was helping create a better world. It was a period of incredible awakening for me. I had a sense of fulfillment. But as the 1990s progressed, this sense of fulfillment became lost to frustrations, disillusionment, even anger. By the end of the 90s, I was losing my empathy and compassion, creating suffering with an inner anger and a growing disconnection between my personal actions and my values. I've lived here in Peterborough for a decade, but it's only been the last half of those that thoughts of spirituality have entered my mind. Even more recently have been the ideas and practices of Buddhism. Much of that has been a response to my own suffering and my yearning for spiritual growth to help me reconnect with the world and to regain my love of peace and compassion, both for myself and for the world around me. Many in Western culture are similar to me in that they're looking for more spiritual meaning in their life. Buddhism is one area that many are turning towards. But what is Buddhism? And what does Buddhism offer people in the 21st century? Is there a difference in how people practice Buddhism who were born into a Buddhist society versus those who became Buddhists along the journey of their life? To better understand Buddhism, I spoke to a number of very interesting people, both here in Southern Ontario and in India. I would like to share some of those conversations with you.
So something that's really radical about Buddhism, we're talking about a system of beliefs that's 2,500 years old, and you have this guy who kind of tells you don't believe everything I say. It's just kind of like, you got to check it out for yourself. I mean, how radical is that? I mean, really.
I think it was the openness at that time in my life that brought me to Buddhism, and it spoke to me in a way spiritual teachings have never spoken to me before. I also found that I was encouraged to question. I was encouraged to question everything. And there is a saying from the Buddha who says, just in my own words now, not the Buddha's words, do not believe anything just because it's written. Do not believe anything because your elders have told you. Do not believe anything because your religious books say so. And that just hit me like, wow. But what it does say at the end of that quote is, but if you find something, you study it, you practice it, and you realize that after very careful observation and going deeply into it, that it is for the well-being of others, then study it, practice it, and use it.
Buddhism obviously it's a religion, but it's not in a religion whereby you're sort of compelled to believe everything. The one thing I sort of like about Buddhism is very relaxed about a lot of things. I mean, people coming from other religions and continue to believe in your faith. But there are, perhaps, useful points in Buddhism where you can take home. The Buddhist approach of compassion and loving kindness and developing wisdom. You could, and just continue to keep your faith. I mean, there's no compulsion for people to convert to Buddhism. I mean, that's not the whole purpose of Buddhism. You don't go around converting people. It's not important.
The Blessed One's disciples who have practiced well, Sangam Namami, I bow to the Sangha.
The first noble truth, the core tenet of Buddhism, states that there is suffering. What does this imply? I had been poking around the Tibetan monastery in Sarnath with all its internal life, where I met Tenzin. His parents had fled Tibet. He was now living in the monastery, studying in Sarnath, hoping to go to the Buddhist university that was located in Sarnath.
Suffering. So the causes of the suffering is categorized in attachment, aversion, and ignorance. So these are the causes of suffering. And I suffer because I possess these cause.
I met Barb through the Zen Center in Hamilton. Very quickly, I realized that Barb and I suffer in similar ways.
For a very long time, I was a very unhappy person. I'd had some difficult times in my childhood and came through it fine, because I'd met the right people in my life at the right times. But there was still a lot of residual anger left. Things I hadn't dealt with, things that I needed to deal with. And what I find has happened to me with Buddhism is that when I used to get really, really angry and my children were small, sometimes it would come out at them.
When I saw a big, beautiful car, and it arises me that, oh, that's a lovely car, I should have that car. How it would be great that if I possessed that car would be mine. So, but I don't have, and it creates a little depression to me.
Well, no one's perfect, and of course they push buttons, but that's what people do. That's what human beings do. We push buttons all the time. But sometimes I was becoming angry, and it really was no one's fault, and I was angry because I wasn't getting things the way I wanted them.
George Stewart is part of the Buddhist community, or Sangha. A potter, he was in a very busy time preparing for a showing and an upcoming class he was teaching. He suggested talking in his shop. He could work while we talked and be more at ease with the camera rolling.
Not seeing, holding on to things. So we get so busy gripping, reaching, and then holding that it starts to hurt.
As I talked to various Buddhists in Peterborough, many mentioned I should speak to Don Farron. Don often offers reflections at the Buddhist place sittings. A gentle, reflective man, he integrates aspects of Buddhist teachings in his therapy work.
So the first, often people talk about soul, they see Buddhism or the first noble truth as life is suffering, right? Now how I look at it and how from teachers that have been instrumental to me, I see it as there is suffering. So there is this experience of discontent, of suffering, which is inherent in worldly life. So when you say there is suffering rather than life is suffering, it is this object or this experience, and then the whole teaching or the path is to understand the nature of that, the cause or conditions that give rise to that, the cessation of that, and what leads to that, what leads to freedom from it.
Only hours before he was to begin a 10-day silent retreat at the Root Institute in Bodh Gaya, I met Clarence Chu. I was instantly struck by his warmth, humility, and openness.
I was just having lunch with a monk, and I was just saying, well, you know, it's kind of a lot easier to see suffering in India compared to Fifth Avenue in Manhattan, you know, with the Gucci's and the shops and everything. But he disagreed, and he's right. I mean, there are a lot of suffering in you know, wealthy, civilized places. I mean, there's this sense of, I guess, emptiness that propels people to distract themselves, to want to go shop or to do stuff, and everything's happening out there is externalized. I mean, you fill it up with things, you know, possessions, because there's a certain lack inside that you don't want to see, you don't want to confront. So you kind of end up making your life very busy. So when you're alone, you can't bear the thought of being alone. You got to pick up the phone, call a friend, and, you know, go to the movie. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do all those things. I mean, but it's also important to have time for yourself to really kind of face up to what life's all about. I mean, it's the eternal question, isn't it? What is life all about? And you just can't Google it and you know, get a textbook answer. You got to find it out for yourself, what life is for yourself, really. I was lucky because I was born in a Buddhist family in Penang. My mom and dad, they're Buddhists. You know, they go to the temple. It's primarily Theravadan Buddhism. And I started learning how to meditate with mom. We used to kind of go to the temple at night, but once a week. So, you know, we'll just study meditation under the monk, mainly sort of, you know, concentration, shamatha meditation, and also a bit of insight, vipassana meditation.
It seems as if much of the basis of suffering, according to Buddhists, is internal, really a state of mind. Does this imply that the mind is the root of much of our suffering?
Buddhism to me is all about mastering your mind.
And I would say that sometimes I wasn't terribly kind. And I did have a lot of problems with that, and I did try and change my behavior, but found that my past was interfering with the present so much that I couldn't really do that. I wasn't able to. I didn't have the tools.
My life's so busy right now, just sometimes crazy making busy. And there's worries and stresses. And yesterday I realized that for quite a few hours in the day that I was down. And I thought, oh, here it is. This is the depression thing, the low-level depression. And it didn't bother me. I thought, boy, you need a good night's sleep too, don't you? So I knew it would pass. And you know what, it does. And it didn't used to. Not like that. It used to hang around sometimes for 2 months. There'd be a period right around now in the fall and another one in January, February. And none of them last. So that's something. That's
Why don't they last?
There's just the knowledge that they're just states, mind states, that I mean, inside, like at a gut level, there's I could look at it yesterday and see it for what it was and know it wouldn't last. And indeed, it didn't.
Paula Anderson is a woman I met at the ecology park where we both had worked. Growing into a friendship, I was amazed at how she combines organic gardening, a position of waste reduction coordinator at Peterborough Greenup, and teaching sustainability at Trent University. What really impressed me was her ability to remain positively focused on environmental issues, while I saw so much negative. Paula is a practicing Buddhist who has taken refuge in Buddhism, the Buddhist equivalent to being christened. It was Paula who gently opened the first doors of Buddhist thought to me.
A teacher that I really appreciate, Thich Nhat Hanh, he describes it like seeds. In our mind, there's all kinds of little seeds in there. Ways, ever since we were little, right? There's little seeds. Since we were babies, our culture has provided, right? We've provided this way of thinking, way of doing. And when we're little and we're brought up in a culture, these things just happen. They're not always cognizant. We just learn, just how we learn how to speak a language, right? You just learn it when you're a kid. I don't know how it happens. It just happens, right? It's the same thing goes with all of these other things, these habits of the way we're told this is right and this is wrong. We should do this. We should not do this. We should act in this way. All those kinds of things. They become habits in our mind. And depending on your upbringing, you can have all kinds of different habits, positive and negative, right? So these habits of our minds are like little seeds. So you can actually choose which ones you want to cultivate and which ones you don't want to put so much time in. That maybe you've decided that's not such a great habit of thinking that way all about something, or so that you can actually open up a whole new way of understanding and looking at things. But it's giving yourself the time. And in Buddhist practice, that's part of what it is setting aside some time and in your life to cultivate these kinds of things like right understanding.
Last year, I had went to the birthplaces of Buddhism, Sarnath and Bodh Gaya in India, an area of beauty and tranquility. In Bodh Gaya, I attempted my first meditation, took a mini introduction course on Buddhism, and spoke to some monks. As with many things one does for the first time, I had my doubts, but had the fortune of having Hedwig Bakker as the meditation instructor. Having teas at night with her in the most venerated place of Buddhism, I discovered my first teacher, who inspired me to move past my beginner frustrations. Here was a woman who for 7 years had embraced life in India and Nepal, living there full-time, splitting her time between Buddhist teachings and helping create a primary school for some of the most disadvantaged children in the world.
Buddhism is all about, what is my mind all about? And to try to get more understanding about my mind and to try to develop it to, first of all, to create inner well-being, and then also if inside there is a more sort of inner contentment, inner peace, then that is what I share with the world.
If you can sort of cut through some of all the things that constantly are going through our minds, because we are trained up to have busy minds all the time, thinking, planning, kvetching about this and that, all kinds of stuff are going through our minds all the time. But if you can watch that enough that you can see what's happening there, it's sort of like when you watch somebody and they realize they're being watched, right? It's not even to watch, it's just to recognize that this is happening. And once it's recognized, I find anyway, for me, it slows down. Because it's like, oh, well, do I even need to be thinking about that all the time? No, just let it go, right?
At first I thought that I'm Buddhism because my parents are Buddhism. But when I learned a little bit more about Buddhism, I realized that Buddhism is not an inherent Buddhism. Being a Buddhism, you hold a firm belief towards triple jump, and you accept the Buddhist philosophy, and your actions should be non-violent. you accept these conditions, then you are Buddhist. That's what I realized. Otherwise, it is the simplest definition. My parents are Buddhism and I am Buddhist. That's not make sense.
Paula mentioned letting go at the end of her last statement. What does this mean, letting go? And what are we letting go of? For example, the anger that has become part of my fabric and such a negative energy. How do I let go of this?
So I think it's important to understand in that concept of what it is that we're letting go of, because that's the important thing, is that in our culture we're always trying to get something, we're always trying to, although we're not aware of it, to control our experience, to get a particular experience. And that is what the teaching is pointing to, the struggle is that particular process of trying to get, trying to move away from. So we're always caught in this moving towards, moving away from, and that's what we're letting go of. And in that process of always moving towards or moving away from, there's the self. So it's dawn moving away from, dawn moving towards, dawn trying to get an experience. And so in the process of we're letting go of that, we're letting go of self. And then as we do that, we're here. And in being here, being present, that's also part of that letting go.
A friend of mine said, well, what's up? I go out shopping and I feel good, and I'm not suffering. And